Morning, everybody. My name's Mel. I think probably most of you know me, but if we haven't met, I'm part of the OxLEP Skills team. Welcome to our first OxLEP Training Provider Forum. We were hoping to make this a face-to-face event so that we could have some good discussion and conversation going. Obviously, our plans have been changed slightly in the current situation. So please bear with us. This is a new world for us. I'll be introducing the speakers and my colleague Katie will be clicking through the slides. So I'd just like to say thank you to Debbie from EMSI, who's kindly offered to host this for us. If you would like to download a copy of the agenda, you can get that from the little control panel on the right-hand side that says handouts. So I'm going to introduce you to each of the presenters this morning, who will talk you through a range of topics. If you have any questions for any of the presenters, can I please ask you to type a message into the questions box? And we will keep an eye on those, and I will pose them at the end of each speaker's session. We may not have time to get through everything this morning because we do have a packed agenda. So if we can't answer all your questions, we will come back to you after the webinar with some answers for you. The session will be recorded, so we'll also send you a copy of that so that you can listen again to the speakers, and we'll be in touch with that as well after the event. Okay, first of all, just a quick reminder of the agenda. As I mentioned, you can download a copy of this from the handouts. And I'd like to introduce you first to Adrian Lockwood, Chair of the OxLEP Skills Advisory Panel, who's going to give us a short welcome. Over to you, Adrian.
Thank you, Mel, and good morning, everybody. And I would like to add my personal very warm welcome to this first virtual OxLEP Training Providers Forum. By way of a very quick introduction, in addition to chairing the Skills Advisory Panel, I'm also Deputy Chair of OxLEP, and it's been my honour for the last 9 years to have chaired the Oxfordshire Skills Board, which now forms the Skills subgroup of OxLEP and now operates the local Skills Advisory Panel in conjunction with the DFE. However, there's more to come about OxLEP Skills and Skills Advisory Panels a bit later from other presenters. Just so that you're aware, as such, I come from, therefore, private sector local business, and I'm one of many such volunteers who offer their insight and practical experience in supporting OxLEP to deliver, relevant programs throughout the county. I'm sure you all don't need me to remind you that we currently live in interesting and highly challenging times with the COVID-19 pandemic, and I'm empathetic because, still operational. My own business has seen a greater than 50% fall in revenues over the past few weeks. And so we all have to look at different ways of doing things. It has long been our aspiration to build a better relationship and forum with all training providers in Oxfordshire, especially the independent sector. And so I do hope that you will find today's webinar valuable and that this forms the start of a routine two-way set of forums and engagement. And who knows, one day we might even all get to meet face-to-face in meetings. However, there is a packed agenda, as Mel has said, so I think we should move on to the interesting stuff. And with that, back to you, Mel.
Thank you, Adrian. No questions at the moment, so I'll hand you over to Sally, who's our Skills Hub Manager. Over to you, Sally.
Thank you, Mel. Morning, everybody. I'm Sally Andreu. I'm the Skills Hub Manager here at OxLEP. And welcome to our Training Provider Forum, Connecting Provision with the Skills Landscape. I'm going to give you an introduction about OxLEP Skills, the skills strategies that we're working on, and really to kind of start having, like Adrian said, that discussion and how we can collaborate moving forwards. Thanks, Katie. Next slide, please. Thank you. So firstly, OxLEP was established in 2011 and it's one of 38 LEPs across England. Our vision for Oxfordshire is for it to be a vibrant, sustainable, inclusive, world-leading economy driven by innovation, expert enterprise and research excellence. As a LEP, we're proud to have invested in our skills infrastructure across the county. We've supported about £24 million worth of investment, which includes a new STEM, hospitality, care and advanced skills centres across the county. We've recently invested £500,000 in Advanced Skills Centre through the UK AEA, which will in turn support the recruitment and training of about 240 high-level apprenticeships over the next 4 years. So to set the context of this slide, what the Oxfordshire economy looks like, and I hasten to add it is pre-COVID-19, and we're going to obviously see what that looks like post-COVID-19. But at the moment, this is what we understand. This slide shows that we are one of the top 3 contributors to the UK Exchequer, creating about £23 billion worth of gross value added each year. So basically, we contribute more to the Treasury than we receive. And since 2011, we have seen about 50,000 new private sector jobs created, with 51% of the working age population educated to degree level or higher. One of the challenges we're constantly trying to address is only 3% of annual growth in apprenticeships, which is below the UK average of 12.5%. I think we're on different slides there. So the slide you've got at the moment is a local industrial strategy. Sorry, could you just go back? Thank you. The local industrial strategy, or the LIS as we call it, was launched last September. It directly responds to the UK industrial strategy, which was launched by the government in November 2017. This aims to increase growth and productivity across the country and to create more prosperous communities. The UK industrial strategy is based on 5 foundations and 4 grand challenges. The 5 foundations are ideas, people, infrastructure, business environment and places. The 4 grand challenges are artificial intelligence, ageing society, clean growth and future of mobility. The LIS responds directly to the UK industrial strategy. This proposal, which has been signed off by government, is highly ambitious as it positions Oxfordshire as one of the top 3 global innovation ecosystems, highlighting our world-leading science and technology cluster from now to 2040. Importantly, the LIS recognises that it's critical that we develop the people and skills strategy in order to capitalise on the emerging industries. Thank you, Katie. Next slide, please. So through the creation of the LIS, we're now working strategically with a variety of government agencies on economic developments. The Department for Business Energy, or BEIS as we're calling it, is abbreviated. Through the social contract, we've created 3 business case proposals, focusing on primary and secondary schools, apprenticeship and T-levels, and adult skills and employment, which we call OxLEP. And these proposals will be submitted to government in July for review and proposal and ideally funding, depending on which programmes get taken up. The ARC includes 3 other regions: Buckingham LEP, SEMLEP, which is South East Midlands, and Cambridge and Peterborough Mayoral Combined Authority. The vision for this work is to work collectively on single bids to reinforce the place as the most innovative, growth-orientated region in the world. And one of the ambitions is to improve access to apprenticeships and T-levels. The Department of Education, DfE, the Skills Advisory Panel, which Adrian leads on, is a representation of employers and public and private sectors. It recognises that people are our most valuable resource. We received funding from the Department of Education in 2019 to create a skills and labour market research report, which Sarah is going to talk about after myself. But it provides us with a fundamental understanding of the skills landscape, again, although pre-COVID-19. But we have been commissioned by DfE to create a local skills action plan to address the challenges raised in the labour market research. This work will be submitted to the DfE by March 2021. And Education Skills Funding Agency, the ESFA, we've been working in collaboration to inform employers about the changes to apprenticeships, i.e. standards and the levy access, and to raise awareness of T-levels and industrial placements. And using small parts of funding, we've created video resources for both learners and employers to promote both apprenticeships and T-levels. Thank you, Katie. So how do we, from that work, which is strategic, we actually deliver a lot of programmes in-house. We're probably one of the larger LEPs And because we've got our internal delivery, these are just some of the programs that we're working on, which all have focus on apprenticeships and T-levels. We want to create pathways that provide young people and local communities to develop the skills needed to access new employment opportunities. The main aim is to promote the benefits of apprenticeships to employers through Grow Your Own campaign. We've been delivering this through the 5 skills programme. The ESF Skills for Business programme engages SMEs from 1 to 249 employees on their skills needs. This can include upskilling of current staff, finding apprenticeships, and also industrial placements. Employees receive about £1,500 worth of free consultancy, and the product they get at the end is a free training and development plan, which signposts to providers. So if you've been approached by Kate Pullen, who's our lead on this, if you would like to become a preferred provider, please get in touch. The Careers and Enterprise Company, the CEC partnership work, is aimed to inspire and prepare young people for the fast-changing world of work. We're currently working with 43 secondary schools on the Gatsby benchmarks, which are the 8 guidelines that define the best careers provision in secondary schools. We also facilitate regular apprenticeship presentations by ASK. The Oxfordshire Apprenticeship Awards is in our 4th year, and we run it on a non-for-profit basis. This event is nominated, judged and sponsored by business. It celebrates young people and employers who've gone above and beyond to celebrate apprenticeships. It was due to be hosted at Williams F1 in April, but we've moved it to October, and we're just reviewing obviously what happens if it is going to go ahead then. We also run the Apprenticeship Ambassador Programme, which engages employers to donate apprentices' time to raise the profile of apprenticeships across the county. This can include giving presentations to school assemblies, or even actually doing social media blogs or interviews. The Work Experience Service supports 4,500 young people to have a meaningful experience of the workplace. We work with over 20 schools to facilitate a service where student placements are health and safety assured by NEET-BOSH trained staff. And finally, the community engagement plans, or SEPs as we call them, work closely with business and local authorities to develop a shared approach on recruitment, ensuring people get better access to employment and training in Oxfordshire. Recent SEPs include the Westgate, Barton Park and Bicester Eco Town. So all of these 5 programmes have some aspect of apprenticeships, and that's why it's really important that we can reach out to yourselves and work together on our collective work. Next slide, please, Katie. Thank you. So you've all had an opportunity to complete a COVID-19 survey result, and we felt it was really important that we heard your voice and some of the challenges that you might be experiencing, and certainly we can share that back to the Skills Board and our contact at Bays. At the moment, we've had a kind of initial 35% take-up of the survey. Of these, 71% were independent, 14% employer providers, and 14% are higher education. The survey will be kept open for another week, so you can complete it. So please do. It would be really helpful for us to kind of really get an idea of where you are and what we can do to help. Some of the main challenges reported include employer confidence. Businesses are reluctant to recruit apprentices or upskill current workforce. There's risks when lockdown lifts and the government withdraws furlough support at this times, and the terms of current apprenticeships keeping jobs or availability of new starts. 100% of learning is now done online, and some of which was never delivered virtually before. So you've obviously responded really quickly to try and maintain those apprenticeships, which is fantastic. The lack of support, you're concerned about grants or rent reduction, and you're asking for apprenticeships need to be promoted and support with lack of vacancies, and invitations to career events at schools and trying to ensure that schools are making students aware of apprenticeships and promoting the benefits of apprenticeships to business. On that note, thank you, Katie. Can we go to the next slide? We're already starting to action that final point to raise awareness and trying to promote apprenticeships. We've been doing that all along, and that's why I kind of wanted to show some of the delivery programs that we've been doing. But actually what we've got is we're creating, sorry, bear with me 1 minute. So we've actually having a virtual careers fair and for students and parents carers on the 11th of June from 12 p.m. to 2 p.m. So we'll be delighted to kind of give you more information and see how you could get involved. We've got video resources, like I said, about to promote apprenticeships and industrial placements. And we're also going to be doing a skills Q&A for young people on how do we ensure the class of 2020 are not forgotten, and that's a working title, and that we anticipate will be done in probably either June or July. So I think at the moment we would just really like to see if you've got any questions, if you're talking about COVID-19, and see if there's anything we can really talk about before I move on to Sarah.
So no questions have come in, Sally, but I think we'd welcome, as Sally said, all of you to complete the survey if you haven't yet done so. And if something comes to mind following this session this morning, please do get in touch, and we'd love to hear your views and how we could support and help you further. So thank you, Sally. Yeah, no questions at the moment. So thank you for that, and we'll pass you all on to Sarah Marlowe. Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you. Good morning. So I'm Sarah Marlowe. Some of you I may have met, some not. I'd like to introduce myself. I'm the Deputy Skills Hub Manager. Great to meet you all. And today I am going to be talking about the Oxfordshire skills landscape. Thank you, Katie. So as Sally explained, OxLEP recently launched its local industrial strategy. And a key part of the local industrial strategy is ensuring that Oxfordshire has the right people and skills to support growth in the local economy. One of the key priorities within the strategy is to build a skills system that better responds to local demand, which provides a range of opportunities for all across the county. To develop and strengthen the capabilities of local enterprise partnerships in order to respond to those skills challenges faced locally, the Department for Education has set up skills advisory panels, as Sally was explaining. These aim to carry out high quality analysis, which will be used to identify local skills, employment needs and priorities, as well as inform their skills agenda and improve their economic outcomes. Thank you, Katie. The Oxfordshire Skills Advisory Panel has already been formed, as Sally said, and a first set of analytics work was commissioned through Hatchery Generis to support the development of a local skills report and plan, as which Sally mentioned will be published next year. The Skills Advisory Panel analytics identify existing and future skills gaps and employment priorities by looking at the current economic landscape in the area and identifying the strengths and weaknesses in labour markets, exploring skills needs based on current and future demand, and gaining insight into business and employer environments. Then we determine the available skills against those required in the area and identify potential challenges that may restrict the skills supply. We can then assess the type of skills gaps and causes and ascertain whether learner provision and business development meets current and likely future skills demand through current supply. The final stage draws conclusions from this analysis to derive skills priorities for the local area and look at the mechanisms in place to deliver these priorities and design a delivery plan. Thank you, Katie. So along with the Skills Advisory Panel analytics, we've also been looking at other activities, intelligence gathering activities, such as a skills focus group for different industry sectors. And this meeting today forms part of the journey in the development of the local skills report and plan. We're also developing more sustainable mechanisms to ensure our skills data analytics and labour market information are refreshed and current, as well as looking at current impacts and recovery plans for things like Brexit and, of course, the ongoing situation with COVID-19. Thank you, Katie. So here are some high-level findings from the Skills Advisory Panel work so far. So Oxfordshire has a high percentage of economically active people than most comparative economic or geographical areas. And the number of people who are economically inactive is very low, particularly given the high number of students who make up our population. So this suggests a tight labour market in the area. Thank you, Katie. This slide shows the area's key specialisms, and we hope that this kind of data can be useful for yourselves as providers of education to have sight of in determining which courses best reflect employer skills needs in the area and therefore potential for work opportunities for your students. So here you can see that Oxfordshire has particular specialisms, for example, education. In terms of sector size, in comparison to that nationally, of course, we do have two very top universities here in Oxford and a lot of high value research facilities located in the area. Construction has also seen recent high levels of growth, and the sector is now substantial in the area in terms of the number of jobs it supports. We've also seen a fall, though, in jobs available, for example, in arts and entertainment. Although this sector does still account for quite a substantial number of jobs in the area, it's also a key subject choice for local young people in the take-up of further education courses. We see that one of the key specialisms is professional, scientific and technical sectors, with good growth, employment size and location quotient. However, we continue to see less take-up of STEM subjects in further education level courses, as we can see on the next slide. Thank you, Katie. So there is an underrepresentation of STEM-related subject provision, particularly at further education level. That's given that the economic specialisms of the area and the wider Oxfordshire-Cambridge arc, there is a real need to ensure that there's a strong supply and uptake of STEM-related courses. Thank you, Katie. So what are the skills demanded by local employers? A small percentage of employers, actually only 12% in Oxfordshire, consider there to be significant skills gaps. However, they do highlight the need for specialist skills and knowledge. And part of our work will be encouraging employers to take more responsibility for developing a person beyond the learning achieved through a formal qualification, in employer-led induction training and ongoing training to upskill each employee to asset and domain-specific specialist skills needed. However, often the skills employers refer to as missing or underdeveloped are those skills often referred to as work-ready skills, life or soft skills or qualities, such as time management, team working, problem-solving skills, as well as the hard skills such as advanced IT skills, managerial, administrative or sales skills. In fact, we found that the language of skills, particularly in the world of job postings and in communication between employers and education institutions, can be very confused. Often referred to as a skill or a qualification, where in fact sometimes the employer's need is a personal quality. For example, our analysis identified in the top 3 soft skills: leading, leadership, and leading a team. This is why it's important for us to engage with employers to understand their needs more clearly, and with providers such as yourselves to support this communication of the skills which employers need, guiding towards offering appropriate courses and raising awareness for future job seekers, for example, of local career pathways. With this in mind, we have also commissioned some work through a newly formed collaboration of experts from Oxford University, who specialise in the use of artificial intelligence to explore the skills landscape. This commission has included local employer focus groups to establish their current needs and challenges. And as part of this work, we're developing a web tool which uses a new Oxfordshire-specific skills classification born out of local job posting analytics, which we can draw skills which local employers demand in terms of personal qualities, cognitive skills, digital and advanced technology skills, business skills, as well as those asset and domain specific skills. Thank you, Katie. Oh, sorry, Katie, you've already moved on to the slide. Thank you. We just stay on that one. We're in a slightly different order, I think. We need to build a pathway between schools, further education, higher education providers, which can support young people and those looking to upskill to develop the skills that Oxfordshire employers seek. We expect the need for 22,000 more workers to meet future growth, and this is in addition to replacing retiring and migrating workers. The greatest need is actually for elementary occupations. That's a major group which covers occupations which require the knowledge and experience necessary to perform mostly routine tasks, often involving the use of simple hand tools and in some cases requiring a degree of physical effort. Local employers of these occupations report challenges in recruiting the right sort of worker, and this is where we might look to share learnings with providers using the new Oxfordshire Skills Classification web tool to support needs analysis and development of those work-ready skills. There will also be strong future demand for those with degree-level qualifications and above, with future job growth expected in professional, tourism, digital and education sectors, and those sectors identified in the local industrial strategy, such as space and satellite, advanced manufacturing, motorsport, and of course, as we've seen recent evidence on the news, especially life sciences, where we're seeing lots of developments with relation to coronavirus. Thank you, Katie. Oh, Katie, can we go on one? I think I've talked about that one somewhere. Something's got a bit muddled. That's perfect. Thank you. So this slide shows the higher education course take-up for University of Oxford and Oxford Brookes by subject, and demonstrates the good fit between those sectors which will see growth and the skills needs identified by employers in the area. Thank you, Katie. Katie, if we could move on, thank you. As part of the analysis, we also consider factors which might affect skills demand in the future, such as automation, particularly for exposed sectors such as manufacturing and logistics. Ooh. Katie, I'm not sure if we lost the slide. Thank you very much. I'll carry on regardless. Otherwise, wider economic uncertainty, such as the impact of Brexit and the current situation resulting from the coronavirus pandemic, must also help inform the local skills report and plan. Okay, Katie, thank you. So we're currently developing labour market information in easily accessible infographic style reports. These are currently focused on the impacts of COVID-19 and informing the recovery planning. You're welcome to access these, and we would be keen to know your thoughts about what kind of information might support your own recovery planning and the challenges you are facing. Thank you, Katie. In the first draft, for example, we've included Oxfordshire-focused data on coronavirus cases, business impact modelling, such as the types of measures taken by local businesses to cope with the impact of coronavirus on its workforce, such as increasing or decreasing hours, laying off staff in the short term, recruiting staff for the short term, or what proportion of their workforce was furloughed, off sick or made redundant. These models are based on the results of the new fortnightly ONS Business Impacts of Coronavirus survey. Thank you, Katie. Other data in the report shows the impact on claimant numbers for out-of-work benefits, along with the scenarios of the effects that redundancies or job losses in affected sectors might have. We're also starting to look in more depth at those affected sectors, such as the impact on job postings, So we're working using the MZ Analyst tool to support a lot of that work, and we have speakers from MZ later on in the agenda to help you understand how you might be able to use those tools further to support your recovery planning. So, Katie, we're just onto my provider forum collaboration slide. Thank you. So I hope that I've highlighted briefly the type of work we're currently completing, and I hope that this can provide some ideas of how we might develop ways of collaboratively working going forward through this provider forum. This will of course feed into and support the development of the local skills plan, underpinning the local industrial strategy, and will enable us to build a skills system that better responds to local demand and which provides a range of opportunities for all across the county. We have speakers from the Department for Education who will help you see how these local plans feed into the national plans. We'll send the links to the currently available resources I've mentioned following this meeting and keep you updated on those in development through future forum meetings and communications. So we're looking at developing, of course, the skills monitor, which I mentioned with the new Oxfordshire skills classification, and the local skills report and plan. That's all from me for now. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Sarah. There weren't any questions for you, Sarah. I think you gave such a clear overview of all those facts and figures, so thank you very much. Just one or two questions came in about the virtual careers fair that Sally mentioned. Just to let you know that we'll be in touch with full details about that very soon and how you can take part. So we'll let you know what the plans are for that. So thank you, and thank you, Sarah. Now I'd like to welcome Elodie and Steve from the Department for Education, who are going to talk to you a bit more about skills advisory panels. Welcome, Elodie and Steve.
Hello, it's Steve here. You probably guessed that I'm Steve rather than Elodie from my voice. So I'm going to start off with this, and then Elodie is going to pick up on the skills advisory panels, and then we've got some questions for you towards the end. So I'm Steve Oram. I'm head of FE system reform at the department, which so this slide is here to sort of give you a bit of context around that. I'm sure many of you, if not all of you, are aware about, I think it was about 12 months ago now, there was a report chaired by Philip Auger on the review of post-18 educational funding, and that's the little graphic to the side there. In the middle box there, I just pulled out some quotes basically from that report, and then on the right hand side there is a quote from the recent Education Select Committee, where the Secretary of State talked about the fact that he has a white paper task force which will be responding to, in parts, to the Auger review, and I'm part of that white paper task force. And as many people have said, and I've heard in various forums, colleges and providers, you know, FE's moment is here. So we need to make sure that we get this right and make the most of this opportunity. So that's partly why a lot of, certainly my part of this will be wanting to hear back from you, which is going to be interesting because it'll be by typing your messages, but we'll give it a go. Just to give you a little bit of a sense of the particular piece that I'm sort of focusing on for this slot, and it's the bit around looking at how we identify current emerging needs. Is that happening in a good way? Are there things that could be done better? Are there things that are working well? And I'm also conscious, as we've been hearing, there's an awful lot going on. So this isn't me saying there's nothing going on. And also some of that is emerging as well. So this is in the context of both what is happening and things that are already starting to happen. But just thinking about how that's working from your point of view, that identification of current, and in particular, I'm interested in the sort of emerging needs, and by emerging, sort of mean short, sort of medium term needs, and then whether whether the right mix of provision is then happening, and what's getting in the way of the right mix of provision. And there was some slides earlier that sort of showed us what that mix of provision is compared to where we think the area's going. And then finally, sort of how easy, well, actually two things: how easy is it for both learners and employers to actually understand and engage with the FE sector, system, whatever you want to call it, landscape, and what's good and what could be done differently. And then finally, something about accountability and how do we both, there's a whole sort of funding accountability that I'm sure you're more than aware of, but in this context of this sort of localness, how does that work sort of horizontally as well as the vertically thing? So that's the sort of area. I'm not bothered about specific, I don't mean answer those questions specifically necessarily, but it'd be interesting to hear towards the end of this your thoughts on that aspect of FE and your role in it and government's role in it, etc. So that's why I'm here, and I'll hand over to Elodie now, who's joining us by phone, I think, because of some IT problems.
Yes, thanks, Steve. I hope you can hear me okay, and you can be my eyes on the slides. So I'm Elodie Lamassin. I lead in Department for Education the Skills of the Panels program. Sarah and Sally outlined the work of the local Skills of the Panels in OxLEP, which feeds into the local industrial strategies to develop skills and growth in the region. And Steve set out Minister's ambition. So let me link the two on where Skills of the Panels fit in. So the Education Secretary is clear that trainings need to lead more to jobs that exist now and also looking ahead in the future, because there is a lot of transformation, with automation, what's happening with Brexit, not to mention, the impact of COVID-19. And Skills of the Panel, or SAPS in short, support that at the local level. So what are SAPS is essentially partnerships that brings together employers, the big ones, small ones, various sectors, and skills provider, colleges, independent providers, universities, and local authorities as well. And SAPS are all about helping resolve mismatches between what skills learners have following the training you provide and what skills employers are after. And SAPS aim to bring better alignment between the two. It came about from two dimensions. We know from the employer skills survey, for example, that nationally employers struggle to fill about a quarter of their vacancies because candidates do not have the right skills. But equally, those people, are training necessarily without realizing the job opportunity and the good careers that are open to them in their local areas. And the impact of COVID-19 is actually bringing a sharper focus on the need to know which skills are in demand for which jobs. In the space of 12 months, we've established 36 panels across England at the mayoral combined authority level, MCA level, where they exist, and the LEP level otherwise. And we've listened to what LEP's colleagues told us, and have taken the approach to build on what existed and strengthen that, learning from that. And Skills of the Panels are now the main forum on work and skills at the local level. In OxLEP, as colleagues mentioned, they've set up the skills subgroup. Adrian chairs it, and the panel includes on the provider side, Oxford Brookes University, which may be with us today, employers, BM WMINI, the UK Atomic Energy Authority, and as well as colleagues from County Council, DWP, and Professor Kip from the academic world. In terms of what SAPs do, they basically feeding a key role on identifying, prioritize, and taking action to address skills and labor market needs. And they do that in 3 ways. They first bring key partners from providers, employers side at the same table. They use robust evidence analytics to understand what the needs are now and in the future, and together having the robust evidence, the right people at the table to act on how best to plug key skills gaps. So in a way, SAPs build on the good work that was happening on the ground, and they formalize collaboration. So changes in the curriculum that you made align more strategically with the skills that are demanded by employers, as well as recognizing that employers also need to be getting better to articulate their needs and take on, for example, apprenticeship. So the SAPs work is also there to promote what the evidence says, and OxLEP, as Sarah and Sally mentioned before, have put that onto their website, doing that at today's forum. And this year we will also start to produce a local skills report for each of the 36 SAPs. And we're currently looking into the exact scope and remit and produce guidance to help all SAPs. Broadly speaking, we envisage the report to see how some change, it's early days, but how the change are bedding in, and as well as looking ahead. And just to quickly finish on the next slide, Katie, on how SAPs fit in and cut across different priorities. So it the SAPs are being the main forum on work and skills at the local level, by using that to look at what the recovery looks like. It's also fitting with the levelling up agenda, which the Prime Minister is very keen on. So the growth is across the country. And as been mentioned before, SAPs underpin the skills, people element of the local industrial strategy. And it's also cut across over departments agenda. So, for example, DWP, who they focus on the UK Shared Prosperity Fund, and we're hoping that the more robust analysis coming out from the SAPs will also help inform bids for example, similar to what you do for digital skills, which is very much of interest from the DCMS. And on the final slide of let's pause there for question. As Steve mentioned, we're very interested in your thoughts on what works, and good to continue on doing that, and also what you would like to change, or questions or challenges for us on SAPs, or more broadly on how to make the skills system more responsive.
Okay, so that's Steve again. That's the slide with the sort of prompt questions. If you have any reflections, any questions that you want to ask us, there may be things that we have to take back. Then now's the time, really. I noticed nothing's come up as yet, I don't think. But
No, we haven't had any questions through yet. It might be that people would like a bit of time perhaps to think about those and come back to you. Does anybody like to ask anything now? That's quite a lot of information to take in, isn't it? So perhaps what we'll do is we'll obviously share the recording and we'll share the slides. If anybody has anything that they'd like to ask, we can certainly put the questions across.
Absolutely, and it won't be the only opportunity over the next while. So,
just having a quick look to see if anybody is typing anything in. No, we don't have any questions typed in at the moment. I'm sure people have lots, but we'll certainly take them and come back to you. Okay, thank you very much. That was really interesting, Elodie and Steve. Appreciate your time to share that information with us. Could I now please hand across to Anthony from EMSI, who's going to talk to you a little bit about labour market information and analytics.
Good morning, everyone. Thanks, Mel. My name's Anthony Horn. I'm from EMSI, and I'm delighted to be here with you all today. So I'm going to be talking about using labour market data and analytics tools to help you plan your provision and connect with students, particularly in the short term. And we've already heard quite a lot about this this morning. So I personally lead on our new engagements with the FE sector in the UK, both colleges and independent training providers. And I also lead our business unit out in Australia, where we similarly work across both technical, further education and universities. The topic of today's session is all about using that labour market and skills data to help you plan and engage. And it's obviously certainly fair to say that we're in a rapidly changing world when it comes to the labour market, such that having access to usable, actionable, up-to-date data is vitally important. So agenda on the screen now. What I plan to cover in today's session is firstly some labour market insights specific to the current situation around COVID, some of the immediate term impacts that we can see on the labour market, and also a hint towards some more medium and longer term considerations. Then we'll have a look at why understanding a more structural, complete overview of the labour market is important. And then finally, I'll quickly outline the offer that we have on the table to provider members, which is all about getting you access to that up-to-date, relevant labour market and skills data to help your business over the coming weeks and months. Next slide, please. So before I get on to that, just a very, very quick introduction to EMSI for those of you who aren't familiar with us already. So we're a global labour market data firm. We're headquartered in Idaho, USA, and we have operations across a number of countries, including here in the UK, as well as Canada, Australia, and others. Next slide, please. And our very focused mission is to spend our time investing in solid, reliable labour market and skills data, and then providing that to you so that you can make more informed decisions to help your business and to help the people and employers that you work with. Next slide, please. Now, I could obviously spend the entire session talking about what labour market data is and where it comes from, but I'm sure you'll be delighted to hear I'm not going to do that. Just this one single slide to simply outline that useful labour market data is a combination of large-scale, well-organised structural data, which typically comes from central governmentally sourced entities like Office for National Statistics here in the UK, as well as big data, which we all often hear talked about, which really means that it's less well-organised data and it tends to be coming from a huge variety of different places. But something like job postings data, which is big data, can often give us specific in-depth insight into things like employer demands, skills trends, and it's often more up to date than some of those big structural data sets. So by combining the two together, we see the most useful insights. Next slide, please. Moving on then to the main items for my session today. Firstly, let's talk about the current situation. I guess anyone delivering a session at the minute about labour market data and about using labour market data who didn't reference COVID would perhaps be under-delivering somewhat. So I did think it was essential just to share some early insights at what is still, although it probably feels to us all like it's been years, it's still actually a relatively early stage in the crisis. Next slide, please. So what do we know right now in terms of the labour market? Well, we all know that there has been a significant shutdown on pretty much all activity in society, and therefore economic activity and labour market activity. From a labour market data perspective, and from a labour market perspective in general, the current situation involves disruption to both supply, so work and economic output, as well as demand, so people buying things and industry buying things from each other. Both of those things are being disrupted at the same time here, so that's quite unusual because more often in an economic slowdown, those things don't happen at the same time. So that's throwing up some interesting insights with relation to the labour market. We also know there are various interventions in place to support the economy and people, but by their very nature they are short-term or are going to need to be short-term. So the timing around everything here is absolutely crucial. So when things start opening up again and when the labour market and the economy starts churning again, whenever that happens, that's going to have the biggest impact on what happens in the medium and longer term. Next slide, please. What else do we know? What do we know right now? Well, the best and really the only immediate term indicator of what is happening to the labour market is found in job postings data, which whilst it's not absolute in that it doesn't cover all of the economy, it is a solid indicator of immediate term employer demand and immediate term employer activity. So what's happening right now? Well, what we see on screen here is a representation of the huge fall in employee recruitment activity since the beginning of the crisis across the Oxfordshire LEP region. So on the left-hand side, we see how job postings across the LEP region have trended over the past few years. Ignore the beginning of the line in January 16 because that's when the data feed started, so it looks artificially low. But if you can see the green line on the left there, what we're seeing are those typical seasonal peaks and troughs of recruitment activity through 2016, 17, 18 and 19. And then we see a total nosedive vertically downwards from the beginning of March this year. And then that same story is told in a little bit more detail across on the right-hand side, the chart on the right-hand side. So that's showing us daily job postings from the beginning of March. You see the dotted vertical line, that's around March the 8th when lots of the kind of shutdown, slowdown measures started to kick in. So the darker line on the right-hand side chart there shows activity from the beginning of March this year, and you can see that massive nosedive there. And if from the beginning of March, and if you compare that to the green line, which is 2019, you can see the magnitude of how employer activity and employee recruitment activity has been impacted. Next slide, please. If we then have a look at how different types of occupations, jobs, are being affected right now, again across the OxLEP region from the beginning of March, this chart shows the 9 different occupational categories, so job categories as defined by UK standard occupational classification codes. And what we see here is that every occupational category, so every type of job, has been negatively impacted since the beginning of March in terms of employee recruitment activity. Sales and customer service jobs have seen the biggest hit in percentage terms, 50% hit across the OxLEP region since the beginning of March, which is pretty scary. Operational frontline care-related jobs have seen the smallest hit in both percentage terms and overall numbers. Next slide, please. And indeed, if we dig deeper into those occupational classifications, one of the key messages coming out is that we see caring personal services jobs are actually one of the few occupational categories, the few jobs that are seeing actually growth across the OxLEP region from the beginning of March. So that classification includes things like care home nurses and auxiliary nurses, support nurses and support nursing staff in hospitals. And in fact, that data is probably underestimating true growth in care-related jobs, because jobs in that sector will often only have one job posting where they're actually wanting to recruit hundreds, if not thousands of workers, particularly at the minute. So negative employer impact across the piece with some shoots of positivity. Next slide, please. Now, I'm not going to say a huge deal about what is going to happen in the future labour market, simply because no one actually knows that yet, and anyone who claims to know what's going to happen next must have a very good crystal ball. And that's largely because we don't yet know how long this is all going to last, as I mentioned earlier on. So how the restrictions and when the restrictions are lifted will have a huge impact on how everything turns out in the longer term when it comes to industries and jobs and the labour market itself. However, there are a few things to mention. Next slide, please. So this is a table that breaks some of our considerations down into the short, medium and longer term down the left-hand side there. And then across the horizontal along the top of the table, that breaks down the key problems at each stage, the data that we can access to help, and then the insight that some of those data sets can bring. I'm not going to read through all of this. I'll mainly just touch on the right-hand column about insight. So we're still right now in the short-term lockdown stage. So our focus needs to be on how things like the immediate term employer activity, which we've just seen on previous slides, impacts on unemployment in the longer term, and how, for example, key workers are affected, which again we touched on a previous slide there with some care-related jobs. And as we move into the medium-term stage, when we begin to surface, which hopefully we'll start to move into that stage pretty soon, we'll start to get a more complete view of how jobs right across the labour market are being affected. So, for example, as the furlough support scheme starts to change, we'll then be able to start to work out which jobs are being hit in a more medium longer term perspective rather than just a short term thing, and whether people in those jobs that are severely affected and aren't just going to start up again, whether people in those jobs have skills that can transfer into other jobs or skills adjacencies, as we refer to it here. And at that point, we'll also get a much better view of how this is all affecting industries and sectors across the piece. So, for example, beyond some of the headlines that we've all seen, how many businesses are actually formally closing down, and what does that all mean across the labour market? And then finally, longer term, as I mentioned earlier, which is kind of crystal ball territory right now, as the kind of months and even years pass by, we'll start to see things like new industries emerging, new jobs, new ways of working, perhaps which this crisis is going to accelerate, maybe with more remote working, and even new skills coming more to the fore. But that's way into the future. Next slide, please. Bringing things back to the here and now, it's really important to remind ourselves about the importance of solid labour market data. And we heard from previous presenters about this. So what we know right now about the structural makeup of regional economies should be vitally important to your strategic planning and your day-to-day activities, even given everything that's happening. So I'm just going to run through a few things now that I would urge you to think about when it comes to understanding the labour market, what that means for your business when you're planning your provision and when you're connecting and reaching out to students. Next slide, please. So firstly, we always strongly suggest that you take a look at how your local labour market is structured from an industry point of view. So like occupations and jobs, industries in the UK have a standard industrial classification coding system, which is a useful starting point. So here on screen, we see how jobs are broken down in a particular region, sorted by industry sector. So on the left-hand side table, that's broken down by the highest level industry classification, so things like manufacturing, construction. And then on the right-hand side, we see that same breakdown for the same region at a more detailed cut of industry sectors. Both of these tables are showing how jobs in the different industries changed overall in this particular region between 2015 and 2020. Why would that be useful and important to you? Well, you've heard me say a couple of times that predicting how jobs are going to trend in the next year or two is going to be very much up in the air right now. But what we do absolutely know is that there is historically significant path dependency in UK labour markets. And what that basically means is that whilst individual businesses may not always survive, and lots of them won't survive the current situation, the historic strength of an industry in an area that creates a supply chain and physical infrastructure and a labour market that works in that industry and the supply chain that makes a region relatively competitive and strong when growth begins to return. So what that really means is that whilst of course we're going through a disruptive period right now, if the economic contraction remains reasonably short-lived, fingers crossed, then we can expect some form of return towards that past industry pattern. That means jobs will generally move towards the path that they were already on, whether that is growth or decline. So understanding how your local labour market is built at industry level is pretty important. And we also heard, of course, some of that from Sarah earlier on from the LEP, about some of the structural industry data that you can access from the LEP going forward. Next slide, please. Next, you'll obviously want to think about how your course offering maps against local labour market need. So at a course or a course area level or a course department level, how many individuals are you supplying into the labour market, and how many jobs are there, i.e. demand, across the various occupations that are linked to those courses or course areas, which is a particularly relevant type of analysis for full formal courses or qualifications or apprenticeships or things that last a reasonable amount of time. We can help you make those connections between courses, course areas and relevant jobs. We've been doing it for some 20 years or so, and our Course Vision tool, which some of you may have seen, does that specific job, and I'd be happy to discuss that with you offline if that type of analysis is of interest. Next slide, please. Now, if we think perhaps more about shorter, flexible commercial provision, which from our experience here in the UK, we know that many providers in various sectors specialise in, and I know that many providers on today's session do absolutely that. Well, employer and skills data are absolutely key to helping you. And that's certainly going to be the case in the coming months when we think about things like retraining or reskilling programs that we may well need as we come out of the current COVID situation. So you'll want to know, therefore, at scale, which employers are active in seeking staff and for what jobs. On screen here, we see a quick snapshot of that kind of data for the OxLEP region from the beginning of this calendar year. So which companies have been most active in recruiting and which jobs are they recruiting for? Next slide, please. And a natural follow-on from that would be to understand, again, at scale, so across the region that you work across, what are the specific skills that employers are asking for in that activity right now? Do you already teach these or some of these in your programs? Do you have an existing relationship with the employers we saw on the previous slide? Would you tweak your program to more accurately reflect this skill demand? And can you use some of this information in conversation with existing or potential students as you help them transition through training into work or into a different job? Next slide, please. And coming back around in a way and closing the loop on what I talked about earlier on, what actionable insights right now can you get from COVID-related labour market data? Well, here on screen we see a snapshot of our COVID regional recovery tool, which basically allows you to see how groups of occupations are trending in relation to employer recruitment activity and also claimant count, so a certain measure of unemployment. And this is data that's updated on an ongoing basis, so it's live data, as live as any data can be. So for example, at the bottom right-hand side, we see there jobs that have rising unemployment and at the same time falling demand from employees in a particular region of the UK. And then in the top right, jobs that are seeing increasing unemployment, but actually also increasing demand from employers. That's a very interesting quadrant right now. That's very interesting to how you guys do your business. Next slide, please. So then, with all of that in mind, we have an offer on the table for OxLEP members so that you can get your own hands on some of this data basically immediately to be using in your day-to-day work, so planning courses, planning content of courses, and being informed when you're having those conversations with students and even employers. Next slide, please. So our aim here is not to try and get you on board with each and every bit of data that we have. We heard earlier from other presenters about some of the bigger structural overview data that the LEP can help you with, both now and in the future. What our offer is all about is helping to get you access to the most relevant, actionable data that's going to be most useful to your business now. So what we have on offer is through our existing relationship with the LEP, is the ability for you to access certain selected parts of our MZ Analyst tool, and that's going to allow you to access much of what I've described on previous slides. Price for that would be £5,000 that would give you access to data right across the UK for the rest of this calendar year. Now, obviously, we appreciate that some providers may well be awaiting decisions on financial support, whether that be credit or loans or some other structural support, and we're obviously very aware of that. But the good news from our side is that if and when you'd be ready to go with this and you wanted to access the data, we can get you switched on basically immediately. So usually on the same day to help you get up and running. It's worth mentioning at this point that all of the data I've described and that which is available via the offer on screen now can be delivered to suit your own delivery region of interest. So that might be just across the OxLEP region, but I also appreciate that many providers have different geographic markets, and you want to know what's going on in various different parts of the UK, which is why we've stylized the offer to give you access to data right across the UK. But if you do have a more bespoke, smaller region of interest, let's have a conversation about that, and we can tweak the offer accordingly. To open up that conversation, you can connect with Mel directly at the LEP, or indeed feel free to connect with me directly, and I'm sure that relevant contacts are going to be shared after today's session. Next slide, please. Finally, from me, do keep an eye on our website and social media accounts as we continue to provide various overview insights and more detailed insights over the coming days and weeks. We always have things like short free webinars running and short free reports that you can access. And I'll be looking forward to having a conversation with some of you in the coming days and weeks. That is the end of my slides, I think, and I'm more than happy to take any questions if there are any.
Thank you, Anthony. We did have a question come in around apprenticeships. I think many providers are finding that at the moment, anecdotally, employers are perhaps having to make staff redundant and maybe not recruiting apprentices. Obviously, it's early days in this sort of situation, but is there any evidence from your data that kind of backs up that sort of anecdotal finding so far?
I mean, the short answer is yes, in the sense that, as we saw in some of my slides, kind of recruitment of all jobs is slowing down across all regions of the UK. And again, that's quite unusual. We often see in a slowdown period that different regions will perhaps continue to flourish, whereas in the current situation, it's literally every region across the UK is seeing a decline. So yes, within that data, we do see apprenticeship vacancies and apprenticeships, and yeah, sadly, we are seeing a lot of decline, and hopefully that's just a temporary pause. But yes, is the short answer.
Thank you, Anthony. And also a comment that it's good to see engineering sector looking strong from your data. So it's already sort of highlighting where sectors are maintaining their strength as well as suffering from the current situation.
Yeah, and hopefully that again came through in the point that I made about path dependency, which can sometimes sound like a bit of an overly technical thing, but it basically means that usually in labour markets, things that are strong and things that are large will to some extent come back around after a shock and after a contraction, because of the fact that there are strong labour markets, strong skill supply, strong infrastructure. And that's not to downplay lots of the employers that will struggle and will close. I mean, we're seeing lots of headlines on a daily basis about that, but there will be a lot of industries that will, because of their inherent strength, be well placed to come out of this. And I think the interesting thing on that will be, what are the changing needs of employers when that starts to happen? So when something like manufacturing, engineering, construction starts up again, are there different skill demands in the short term that employers have to help them get up and running? Or are the skill demands the same as they've always been? We don't know yet. That's going to be really interesting. And final point on that would be, it's great news that some industries and some jobs will be strong going forward, but we do know that some won't. And what will be an interesting challenge, I think, going forward will be that reskilling and moving people perhaps from one industry into another, or moving people within an industry who have a certain skill set. How can they be helped to transition into jobs that are strong going forward? And I think that's where providers can really excel, if they can quickly put on provision that meets some of those skill adjacency, retraining, reskilling needs. Then that's going to help the economy. It's going to help the labour market in whichever region that is, and it's perhaps most importantly going to help individuals.
Great, thank you. Thanks, Anthony. Well, no more questions have been coming in for you, so thank you very much for giving us that overview. Really useful. I'll now like to hand you back to Sally, who's going to take over the next session.
Yes, thank you, and thank you, Anthony, for that. And I think that kind of leads on very nicely about how we can work collaboratively together to hopefully get through and start to look at what recovery looks like from a skills perspective, and how we can really accelerate. And I know that we're, as I said, I highlighted from the LIS, we're extremely ambitious as a LEP in order to be able to do that with you, and how we can as a region really develop and look at reskilling, look at how we can support young people and really promote apprenticeships. So I've just noted down there's kind of 6 opportunities for yourselves that's open from this morning's session. really to ask you to kind of complete the provider survey. I know I've probably realised that you're probably surveyed out right now, but if you could spend 5 minutes, it would be really helpful just for us to know where you are with everything with COVID-19 and what we can do to support. Get involved with the virtual careers fair on the 11th of June. Feedback on the FE white paper and change and challenges of the skills system to be more responsive with Steve and Elodie. Become a preferred provider, get involved with the ESF Skills for Business programme. Access to the current labour market information from Sarah. We've got the regular updates that you can see, and also the MZ licence offer. So there's 6 opportunities there, and I'll just be really grateful to kind of hear from yourself via the chat as to what you think the forum's purpose is, because I don't want to be here. Obviously, at the moment we're having to talk. We can't have a kind of two-way conversation verbally, but it'd be good to kind of get your thoughts as to what the forum's purpose is, and actually what you would like as future agendas if we were to offer this, and certainly we would be happy to offer it on kind of a biannual status where we can have meetings possibly again in October, to kind of keep you updated and to share our thoughts and to hear from what you need and trying to have that collaborative working. So if I could ask you to put some chats up and we can then have a discussion, that would be really helpful. Some initial thoughts we'd had for future agenda items would be having somebody come in from Ofsted to talk about how the local industrial strategy is being used when they do an inspection, and also the use of destination data to highlight where young people are going, particularly given that we are expecting that young people might be leaving school or a further education without any qualifications, so potentially NEET. So would that be of interest for you? And so perhaps you can let us know, and Mel can relay any thoughts.
Yes, thank you, Sally. One comment's come in to say what the most useful aspect is the employer engagement and supporting inquiries that you receive with provision. That's a comment that's come in through the chat. I don't know if anybody else has anything to add. Sorry, through the questions. If you have a comment or something you want to add, if you could type it in the questions box, that would be great. I think certainly from my perspective, I apologise. I think I missed a couple of hands up during that session. It's been a bit of a learning curve doing things this way. Most of you see me at actual events as with our team. So I think certainly what we'll look at is how we, as well as what we cover, is how we cover it. Whether we're able to get together in a room again at some point, or whether we can find a slightly more interactive way so that we can actually bring you in and talk with you rather than relying on chat boxes. I think that would be something to learn from this session as well. But hopefully it's given you a good bit of an introduction and some background information that will help you.
Thanks, Mel. I think so. If we don't have any comments, and certainly we're going to send out a quick survey for your thoughts. We can send out a quick bulletin of all of the topics and links that we've covered today, and really just kind of wanted to say thank you to Adrian, Sarah, Elodie, Steve and Anthony and Mel for this session. And you know, hopefully we will get to speak to you before. If not, we will, you know, if everybody would like to have another session in October around that time, that would be great. So please leave us your thoughts. We'd be really grateful to hear back. And like I say, it's our first trial. It'd be good to kind of get some feedback and to see whether this really works for you.
Thank you, Sally. Well, just one question's come in. Would it be worth inviting school and college careers teams to participate?
We can certainly look at that, yep.
I think we can think about audience, can't we, for this forum, as well as the what we cover. So thank you for that. It's a good suggestion. And thank you for those that have been kind and said for a first effort, it's been good. We really appreciate you bearing with us and spending the time to come along to this morning. It's been great having you all with us.
Yes, thank you all for your time. Really appreciate it.
You will receive, again, sorry, another survey, a quick survey about the session. As Sally mentioned, we really want to get your thoughts on what would work for you and the sorts of topics, the sorts of methods we could do this. So again, if you could take a couple of minutes to let us know, that would be extremely helpful so that we can plan the next one. So I think that's it from us. Thank you everybody for taking part, and we've really appreciated you taking the time to be here this morning, and we'll be in touch with a copy of the recording and some answers to some of the questions that we didn't address this morning. So thank you all very much.